Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we're talking Teddy Bridgewater, of course. I mean, I'm sure none of you guys are surprised about that. He's supposed to be activated from the PUP list.
Wait, who's Teddy Bridgewater? I haven't heard the name in a while.
Quarterback, Vikings, where's number 5?
Oh, right,
pick.
That guy. Okay.
Yeah, that guy.
The pizza you made, it's a number 5. That was,
right, yes,
that was
yes.
about him. Okay.
That's him, yeah. The Teddy guy, the football man. So we'll talk a little bit about
football man.
Talk about football man Teddy a little bit. We have to. That's just par for the course here. Then I finish up the coverage chart, which will be an article on Vikings territory that should drop on Thursday. So we'll talk a little bit about that, give you a little preview into that analysis. Then we're going to finish up with kind of the NFC picture right now and where the Vikings stand. It's getting weird. Vikings actually are they're the number 2 team in the NFC as it stands today. So we'll talk a little bit about that, what that means, and kind of go from there, see what else happens. So start off, as always, with a note from our sponsor here. This Black Stack Brewing, we got another beer pong tournament. You can check this one out on Facebook. There's an event note thing, if you use Facebook, that is. Come out to Black Stack from 12 to 4 this Thursday. That's the 21st for the second beer pong tournament of the season. Winning team takes home bragging rights and free beer for an entire year. That's right, folks. Free beer for a year. Get your tickets now at beerpong.twincities.directory. That's brought to you by the Twin Cities Directory. Discover the real Twin Cities and sign up today. So make sure to check that out. I actually will be in attendance and competing to win free beer for a year. So this is going to be important to me. I'm going to be very competitive about it, and I'm excited.
You competitive? No.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about another guy who seems pretty competitive himself. That's Teddy Bridgewater, that quarterback guy that people talk about on the Twitter machine. So as you have to have heard, like literally, I don't really need to say this, he was supposed to be activated from the PUP list when the show drops. I guess it'll be Wednesday then. So that brings in, that kind of brings the quarterback controversy that we talked about all summer long to the centerfold now that he's going to be healthy. Sam Bradford, on top of that, might practice on Wednesday as well. There's another report. I believe that was from the Star Tribune. And then Case Keenum obviously has been playing pretty well, and there have been some very strong takes regarding, keeping Case in there for as long as he's winning type of thing. So the main basis of what this particular Teddy conversation is going to be is when to make the move to Teddy, because it does sound like he's 100% healthy. He's been cleared by a trainer within the Vikings facility. He's been cleared by a trainer outside, basically a third-party trainer. He's ready to roll. So when is it time to bring in Teddy Bridgewater? And I guess if there is a time to bring in Teddy Bridgewater, when is that going to be? And it's kind of a follow-up question, something that's important within there is, have we seen the end of Sam Bradford as well? In Minnesota, that is.
Yeah, this is a more chaotic quarterback situation than maybe I have ever seen. And if there has been one, it has not been with the amount of talent that's, amidst this one. Because, the Vikings have had in the past where they've gone from, in 2013, they went from Matt Castle to Christian Ponder to Josh Freeman, back to Castle, back to Ponder, over and over for 6 or 7 weeks there. So that was pretty chaotic. But I think when you bring in Teddy Bridgewater with obviously his talent and then the reputation he has, the fan base, the support, you have Sam Bradford's his talent as well, the way he performed last year. It's all really weird. And then Case Keenum comes in, plays really well. By the perception of he's been winning games, right?
Right.
And so now you have it's essentially you have 3 guys hypothetically that could start, the next couple weeks here. If Sam Bradford's healthy, I'm very skeptical of that, but if he's healthy and ready to go, he could start in the next 2 weeks. Case Keenum has been starting the last few games. He's been playing it well enough for the Vikings to win. He could start, and then obviously Teddy Bridgewater is now clear to practice. So it's all really weird, but I will say this about Teddy. He's going to be rusty. I don't care what you say about him working all off season, being with the team, all these other things. You can't not play a football game for 2 years, essentially, and come back without rust. It's impossible.
Dog, you can't play the board game Sorry for 2 years and not come back without some ruts. You're going to forget some of the rules.
I mean, I've played that board game in the last 9 months. I don't even know the rules hardly.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like that's inherent to being away from anything. For example, I have a major in Spanish. I can't speak a lick of it anymore. Right, I haven't used it. I haven't used it in 4 years since I was in Madrid, Spain, and I basically lost it with the exception to reading it. So
that's why I think so many people are advocating keeping Case Keenum in there as long as the Vikings are competitive and winning games. That's Teddy Bridgewater will be rusty, and that's why I also really like this hypothetical of the Vikings getting a big lead on a team, whether it be the Ravens. I doubt Teddy will be in uniform this week, but if he's activated for the Browns game, if the Vikings can get a big lead in that Browns game and give Teddy some garbage time snaps to knock some of that rust off, that would be swell. It would be ideal for the Vikings. So that's kind of where I see this, but I think Keenum is at least your starter until the bye week at this point. I don't think Bradford will be ready anytime soon. Teddy's probably going to be on the field before Bradford is, but that's kind of a quick summation of where I see this quarterback situation right now.
Yeah, I like I'm okay with people saying Week 10. I believe that's the Washington game on the road. I'm okay with the Week 10 arrival for Teddy Bridgewater. I don't love it just because I believe it's their grass in their stadium that's not awesome, or their turf or whatever they got on the ground there is not awesome for knees specifically. We saw what happened to Robert Griffin, for example. I'm okay with Week 10 because I think that's a good target date given where we're at right now. But I think Week 11 makes a lot more sense here down the stretch. Make sure that he's fully ready to go. Playing against the Rams team that, they can play offense. Sean McVay can definitely call a good football game. So that's you want to have your best quarterback in there. But what's interesting here is that there's literally a question mark about all three of these quarterbacks. The Vikings have three quarterbacks, and honestly, at least two of them are loaded with talent, and one of them has moxie, to say the least.
Moxie.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
So all three of these guys, like Drew said, are capable of winning football games for the Vikings. All three of them have proven that in their careers with the team. But all three of them had these major question marks. Sam Bradford's is really obvious. Is his knee ever going to be fully recovered? Teddy Bridgewater, really obvious again. He's coming off of injury. He's going to be rusty. I don't care that he's been in, the room watching film with the coaching staff and his teammates and on the field throwing the ball around. I want to see him get hit first. So until he gets hit, I shouldn't say I want to see him get hit first, but you know what I mean.
Wow, you want players to get hurt. Wow, you want Teddy Bridgewater to get hit. Wow.
Right, exactly. But there's the question mark there, and then with Case Keenum, like the question mark for me with him is, can he win a playoff game? Is he good enough to win a postseason game? Because I think the Vikings are on a trajectory right now where it makes sense for your goal, like a realistic goal for the Vikings should be to make it to the Super Bowl right now, I think. The NFC is so wide open, and like I said, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but is Case Keenum capable? Like, literally, is he capable of doing it? Does he have the capacity to do so? And if the answer to that question is no, you got to get Teddy Bridgewater ready to roll because you have to believe that he has the ability, otherwise you wouldn't have taken him in the first round. So this is an evaluation thing, and Pat Shurmur's done a heck of a job with whoever's been in there so far, but this might be the most difficult test of all, and that's figuring out which quarterback makes the most sense for the Vikings to win football games, because I love Teddy Bridgewater as much as the next guy, but I want to win football games above all. And if Bridgewater, if he's not 100% there mentally speaking, and Case Keenum gives the Vikings a better chance to win, I know this sounds blasphemous, but we just saw this against Chicago 2 weeks ago. Sam Bradford couldn't quite do it. He wasn't at that threshold of healthy enough. Whether it's mental, physical, whatever it is. Case Keenum gives you a good enough chance to win, assuming that you're not playing at 100%. So this is an important question, and one that's going to be asked every single Monday for the next 3-4 weeks, or at least until we get an answer, right. I guess. But for me, I think Week 11, and I do think that for me, like in my opinion, you play Teddy Bridgewater when he's ready to roll. He's the better quarterback. He's your franchise. I don't think that's ever really changed in my opinion. You got to put him back out there when he's ready to roll, particularly if Sam Bradford is also not ready to go.
But we can never really know if he's ready until he plays. That's the weird catch-22 about this,
Right.
is that, well, we won't know that. He can get as much action in practice as, he wants. We're not going to know if he's ready to play in a game until he steps, into a real game. So it's kind of this weird thing where the Vikings are playing well, and if they're winning games, if it's Case Keenum, you have to roll with Case Keenum, I mean, I think you just have to inherently, even if he's just, I think, which is kind of what's happened the last couple of weeks here, where they're, especially with this Packers game. I guess the Bears game, his presence in there kind of really helped the Vikings win that game. But the Packers, he didn't play well at all. Case Keenum didn't, in my opinion. He made a couple nice throws, but lots of mistakes, lots of inaccurate throws. But the Vikings were able to win without him because they were playing a JV team, which is in the Packers without Rodgers. So but the Vikings are still winning games, I think you jeopardize that if you throw in a guy that might not be ready or a guy that's super rusty while more talented. I would play that safe until it goes badly. Then you throw Teddy in, which, looking at the schedule, there are some really tough games there, which I could see the Vikings, with Keenum losing a couple. You got after the bye at Washington, which has never been easy for the Vikings in the past. And then you have, they're home against the Rams, who are, the number 3 team, I believe, in the NFC now. All of a sudden, they're really good. Then you have at Detroit, at Atlanta, at Carolina in a row. Nothing. I mean, that's a tough stretch. So I would assume you'll get a couple losses in that stretch at the least, and there you'll be able to make that decision between Keenum and Bridgewater. And I'm assuming by Thanksgiving, you'll at least have that a loss to look at. Okay, is Bridgewater now available, is he ready to play, and is he able to play at a higher level than Case Keenum, which I believe at that point he probably would be, but there's always that risk of how much rust is there.
Okay, so then here is the ultimate question then. Is Case Keenum not a backup quarterback anymore? Is he a starting quarterback within a carousel of other starting quarterbacks? Because if he's a backup quarterback, when the healthy quarterback comes back, he goes into the game.
But this is a unique situation where those rules do not apply. I think.
Why not? Why not, though?
Because when a guy sits out an entire season,
I understand
and then
that.
half of another season, I think the rust that builds up, like you can't sit out a game action that long and come back and be the player you were beforehand just right away like that. Like it doesn't happen like that, at least from what I've seen.
Well, is this going to be a situation then where out of absolutely nowhere we could see like a Tony Romo type deal where the quarterback, I guess in this case it's quarterbacks, get hurt and the undrafted kid comes in there and plays well enough to earn a starting job? Like are we looking at this right now? Is this a real possibility?
Let's not compare what Dak Prescott did last year to what.
No, I'm talking Tony Romo back when.
When?
Yeah, I'm talking. I think it was over. I think he took Drew
Bledsoe. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Wow, Drew Bledsoe got cucked out of 2 jobs.
Yeah.
Tom Brady and Tony Romo.
Yeah.
Wow.
Worst luck ever.
Put that together. But I can't say that. I mean, Teddy
it's a
Bridgewater's
critical thinking question. There's no right and wrong answer.
There better not be a right or wrong answer at this point because there's so much we don't know.
I mean, Kurt Warner is another. I mean, if Sam did the example on, it's sort of a joking example on bump and run, but Kurt Warner is another example of this. A guy that comes in and basically shakes things up, plays well enough where you have to. Think about this.
He hasn't proven himself as a starter yet, in my opinion. He's been good enough to keep the Vikings alive and win games when he gets a strong defensive performance, when he has Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, leading the league as top 2 guys in contested catch percentage. When you have that around you, you can be subpar and still win games. That's what he's doing right now. He's a below average quarterback at this point, but he's still able to win because he does, he displays enough, he has enough good plays and good throws to lead an offense down the field with competent guys around him. Like the offensive line, a lot better. Diggs and Thielen, an elite duo. And then Murray and McKinnon are, shaping up to be a pretty solid 1-2 punch in the backfield. So I think when Bridgewater returns, that's only going to be amplified, but that's after he knocks the rust off. And that's kind of the stage where when do the Vikings maybe want to sacrifice a game or sacrifice a quarter or 2 or whatever, how long it would take him to knock off that rust. When do you want to sacrifice that and take that risk? Because I think it's not like they're going to lose the first game Bridgewater gets back. It's just at what point do you want to make that risk and make that decision?
Yeah, I still believe that once Bridgewater is ready to go, he's going to be the guy in there. But I also do think that there's a conversation. It's that this discussion, this argument between people, I know that it's kind of pretty heavily favoring Teddy Bridgewater, but I really do think Case Keenum has, no pun intended, made a case for himself. I think he's doing kind of what Josh McCown did when
he has earned it, I guess. I mean, and I think I'm in the minority when I say he's still been like not bad, but like not that impressive as a backup. I still think he's clearly the backup quarterback here, but here's what I said in the Vikings territory Slack today. I think we had a little debate about this whole situation. Case Keenum right now is a below average quarterback. I think the way he has played, and since he entered with the Steelers, if you look at his entire performance, including the Tampa Bay game, I think he's been below average. But right now, I see Teddy also as a below average quarterback because of all that rust. We don't know how he will respond. So I take that, and you know me more. You know me that I will be skeptical about things until I see proof. So that's why I'm very wary of sitting Keenum just because Bridgewater's healthy. I think that bringing that, he's got to get reps at some point in a game before I'm comfortable, elevating him to the starter, which is why I would love to see the Vikings whip up on the Browns in London and let Teddy get, a quarter or a quarter and a half of reps.
Yeah. So I guess my major takeaway here is that Teddy Bridgewater and Case Keenum could both realistically be the starting quarterback Week 11. They both have. There's reason behind it for either one of those guys.
Both of them are possibilities beyond that too. If the Vikings want some winning streak right now, so they're not going to go away from Keenum.
Right. I guess I don't know. I think that's debatable, but I guess we will see on that. The one thing I will say is, since that we've already kind of established here that there isn't a right or wrong decision, at least in terms of projecting what the success may be, I can totally see the Vikings making a decision that sounds good on paper and having it turning out wrong, and then everyone turning on Spielman and Zimmer for making the wrong quarterback change or not making the quarterback change.
Yeah, that's the thing about this too, is they're going to have like the best information to make the decision, and it's going to be one of those where they have an idea how it's going to play out, but
nobody can
know.
The
whole Russ thing, we don't know. Well, nobody knows how exactly he will respond in a game.
Right.
So, I mean, you're not going to really be able to blame them for the decision unless they make it too soon, which would be like next week starting against the Browns, Teddy Bridgewater. But I can't imagine that they would do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, a lot of stuff to think about there.
It is funny though that we just have kind of pushed aside Sam Bradford. Like we're almost accepting that he won't be the starting quarterback.
I mean, he looked bad in Chicago. I think for me, that's like I'm not opposed to the idea of Sam Bradford returning either. I like Sam Bradford. I think he's a good quarterback.
Absolutely.
I think we can definitely win with Sam Bradford either. Honestly, if he's healthy, he's the best option right now, just because he's in. He's in the season. He's played football recently.
I agree.
But he's not healthy, and that's why he's kind of been excluded from this discussion. This is not like a Teddy campaign or whatever it is. This isn't propaganda for Teddy Bridgewater. This is literally just a situation where I think the Vikings are a two-quarterback team moving forward. And I think Sloter is quarterback number 3, and you're going to end up seeing Sam Bradford go on IR eventually. But again, time will tell. A lot of stuff to think about here, a lot of stuff to digest, kick around. I'm sure Twitter will be a fun place to be for the next month or so. But let's move on from Teddy Bridgewater. Let's talk a little bit about the Vikings defense, and particularly how they covered against, I guess, 2 Aaron Rodgers throws or whatever it was, and then a bunch of Brett Hundley. Like I said before, when I kind of referenced this in the beginning of the show, I'll be dropping an article on this, I believe on Thursday, maybe on Friday, kind of analyzing this a little bit further, but we'll talk about this kind of briefly now and kind of go over some of the statistics. So against Green Bay specifically, the leading target getter was Harrison Smith. He was targeted 8 times by Green Bay. Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes both targeted 7 times. Both of them allowed 4 receptions. The difference there is that Trey Waynes allowed 56 yards and Xavier Rhodes allowed only 24. So Rhodes are definitely still closed there. Terrence Newman missed his 1 shot, allowing 19 yards. Mackenzie Alexander had a nice game, 6 targets, 3 receptions allowed, 28 total yards for Mackenzie Alexander. And then Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks took care of business, and Emmanuel Lemur allowed hit a catch on his only target, but it was for no gain. So what's most impressive here is probably the combined targets to reception totals between Xavier Rhodes and Harrison Smith, given that, in theory, they kind of locked down one side of the field. So between the two of them...
This was the story last week, too, by the way.
Right.
The exact same story that I think they allowed negative yards total last week.
Right.
On what was it? It would have been 4 targets, I think, last week in total.
So this is this week. It's 15 total targets, 7 receptions allowed. So under 50% completion between the two of them for 40 total yards with 2 interceptions.
That passer rating has to be close to 0.
I have no idea how to calculate passer rating. I'm not even going to try.
It's definitely worse than throwing incomplete every single play.
Yeah,
I know that.
Which is 39, right? 39.6 or something like that. So it's definitely lower than that. So I guess, what do you think of this stuff?
Now, I see you attributed the touchdown to Barr.
Yep.
Now, that was a Rodgers-like play almost, and that's a very I know that's going to be heard very as a bold prediction by some people or a bold statement, but it was one of those where the quarterback escapes, and I feel like it was Kendricks that had to make that decision between, do I stay with Adams or do I go after Hundley if he's going to run.
Barr, for me, the way when I looked at it, it looked like zone coverage over the middle where Kendricks and Barr were both in charge of their own spots.
Okay.
The way that Barr reacted after the ball kind of floated over his head about 4 yards and Kendricks had decided to go, I think that it was probably on. Okay. It could have been on either one of them, but Barr was the one that reacted to it, and then he was the one that also reacted negatively to the reception being made. So I kind of, some of this is subjective to some degree with targets. It's difficult to always decide on, one specific guy, especially when you're seeing double coverage, for example. But generally speaking, I go with the guy that's across from him or in man coverage, or it makes sense. Sometimes you can see on the all-22 where one guy passes off coverage to another, that type of thing. And in that case, it looked like it was Barr who had coverage passed to him, and he just kind of got caught in limbo, to be honest. It wasn't really it was a play where the play, like you said, was extended by Hundley, and he sort of just stepped up in the pocket, maneuvered a little bit, and Barr got caught in Devontae Adams found a soft spot in the zone, essentially, and Barr got caught in limbo and just got floated over. It wasn't a great throw by any means. It wasn't poor coverage by any means. It was just a matter of the defense broke down, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and Hundley made a play there. I mean, we have to probably give him credit for stepping up, creating a throwing lane there, and making the defense, pay attention to him. But one thing we should add for Barr too is the first the batted down play on 3rd down on the Packers' first drive. When he was in spy coverage, he was spying Rodgers, and he kind of got his hands up on that little slant over the middle. So that wasn't targeted at him, but he did make that play.
Right.
So that's also something that we should note for Barr, because he won't get that in your chart. He won't get credit for that.
Right.
But that's a play he did make.
That was, I believe, that was a play that Trey Waynes benefited from on that one particular. I can't remember specifically, but I believe that was Trey Waynes that was benefited there. I also want to point out, I tweeted this earlier this week, that Eric Kendricks, he was targeted 6 times, allowed 3 receptions, definitely should have allowed 5 receptions. One of them was on when Rodgers was injured on that play.
Oh, yeah. Is it
Martellus
that dropped it?
Martellus Bennett.
Okay.
Bennett dropped it, and it was a horrific drop, and actually very, very poor coverage by Kendricks as well. So that could have easily added 15 more yards or so to his total, plus another reception. And then also Montgomery dropped the touchdown in the red zone. So that's the second one. So Kendricks could have easily allowed...
initially was touched. Yeah.
His stat line could have easily looked like 5 receptions on 6 targets.
Play. Montgomery ran a little angle right out of the backfield, and Kendricks got smoked on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, so it could have been a lot different for Kendricks. It wasn't a great game by him in terms of what could have happened, which is actually what Pro Football Focus uses in their system. So for those of you that look at those grades on Pro Football Focus and are like, what the hell, he didn't allow any receptions. Well, it's the idea that if the receiver had caught the football and it wasn't dropped, this XYZ would have happened. So that's why his game on paper, it doesn't tell the whole story. You need some context with Eric Kendricks. It actually was not a good performance from him at all. So moving on to the cumulative season total version here now. So overall, very strong game against Green Bay. You could put it that way. Cumulative totals, since these are obviously a ton of numbers here, I'll let you guys kind of check this out for yourself on VT if you want. But we'll mention a couple of the I guess the outliers here. Trey Waynes has allowed the most yards in coverage. He's also been targeted the most, and he's also allowed the most receptions, which I don't think that should shock anyone. But 43 targets this season, 29 receptions allowed, which actually is not that bad. It's not great, obviously, but it's also not that bad. 378 total yards and 1 touchdown. He also has 2 interceptions and 2 penalties, 49 total penalty yards for him. Also on this list, some other impressive stuff. Harrison Smith, 20 targets total, only 9 receptions allowed, 67 total yards, 1 touchdown, but the 3 interceptions as well. You look at just Xavier Rhodes is the other one, of course. 33 total targets, 16 receptions, 157 total yards. He got his first interception last week. So pretty impressive stuff from the Vikings secondary, and I guess all their coverage guys as well. The linebackers are pretty solid. So I guess what are you seeing from this, Drew? Are you as impressed as I am with the Vikings coverage through 6 weeks?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's how many – I'm trying to think of – Matthew Stafford was shut down. That was one of the marquee quarterbacks they've played. Ben Roethlisberger didn't do a whole lot when he was gifted points in that game from the Vikings penalties. Jameis Winston didn't do a whole lot besides garbage time. Drew Brees didn't do a whole lot besides garbage time. I mean, they've kept some pretty solid quarterbacks in check, and then they've really taken advantage of the guys that they should have, with Mitch Trubisky and Brett Hundley. So this is kind of what we have expected. Maybe not the national fan base or national media probably didn't give them this attention or these expectations before the season, but we kind of knew what was in store with this group. We knew Trey Waynes was going to give up a lot of yards just because he was the cornerback 2 opposite Xavier Rhodes. We knew Harrison Smith was a freakish ball hawk. We knew Barr and Kendricks were really good cover guys, and we're going to keep things in front of them. We knew this about this unit. So not a huge surprise to me. Things are going as planned. With Joe Flacco on deck, I'm sure we'll have another shutdown performance here at US Bank Stadium this week.
Yeah, that could be interesting. He obviously did not have a very good game last week. One of the worst games on paper that you might ever see. Oh,
because Flacco's numbers on a 16-game pace right now, it's like, I know box score numbers, but it's something like 2,700 yards, 11 touchdowns, 22 picks, something like that. Like it's like, people like to make fun of Teddy's line in 2015 without looking at the context, and I'm not looking at the context of Flacco yet. I still have to watch the film on the Ravens, but it's like 2,800 yards, 11 touchdowns, 22 picks for a 16-game scale, which is like not great, not great at all. So I'm looking forward to this because I've said in the past that Flacco's not good at all as a starter. At least he's very below average, and the only reason has any hype is because of that Super Bowl run. So this is kind of, for me, this game has some extra significance because I like to see the Vikings really beat up on him.
Yeah, absolutely. That game is something we'll be talking about later on this week, obviously. But I think you're on the money that the Vikings are looking at a pretty good situation in terms of extending this streak of being able to cover efficiently downfield. I want to also throw out before we kind of move on to the final section of the show here is that Xavier Rhodes last week did not allow a catch during the first half. All 4 receptions came I believe during the fourth quarter, maybe 1 in the third quarter. So basically a lot of
garbage. Fourth quarter. I know there was 2 on the last drive there where they were just kind of playing.
So basically all 24 yards allowed last week were garbage time yards, essentially. So he is certainly making the most of his his most recent contract. He's playing like the number 1 cornerback in the NFL.
Also getting respect now from PFF.
And
he's an 80.6 grade now, so he's moving up.
He's into the green now?
He's into the green, barely.
Good for him. All right, so let's finish up the show here with a little discussion about the NFC picture as it stands through 6 weeks of play. Obviously, the Vikings standing at 4-2, looking pretty good right now. It's funny because Philadelphia is the number 1 team in the NFC right now. I believe they have 1 loss. Then you got the number 2 team is the Vikings. Just because last week was such a tremendous shakeup that between the Lions losing, so many things went right for the Vikings last week.
The Falcons lost at home to the Dolphins after giving up a 17-point lead to Jay Cutler.
Right.
That has them out of the playoffs. They are the number 9 team in the conference now at 3-2.
Yeah. I mean,
the number 11 team out of 16 is 500. That's Arizona. So there's 11 of 16 teams are 500 or better. Then you have the Niners at 0-6, the Giants at 1-5, Bears 2-4, Tampa Bay 2-3, Dallas 2-3. So Dallas is 12 out of 16 right now. You have the Rams, the Packers, Panthers, and Vikings at 4-2, with the Vikings somehow leading that tiebreaker. I don't really know how that all works, but that's. And the Seahawks are out of the playoffs, Falcons are out of the playoffs, Lions are out of the playoffs, Cowboys are out of the playoffs, Tampa Bay's out of the playoffs, Giants are out of the playoffs. You have the Rams as the number 4 team, Panthers as number 3 team. You have basically a whole new set of playoff teams. The Saints are the number 6 team. A whole new set of playoff teams in the NFC besides Green Bay at this point, which is it just goes to show how from year to year the NFL can change. Teams can have success based on. I mean, it's such a small sample size of games, but you see in the MLB. Well, I guess not as much in the MLB as in the NBA, but you see teams have sustained years of success and dominance. Whereas in the NFL, with a few exceptions, you see teams kind of rotate between successful years and kind of down years.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the Vikings, what they've accomplished there this year beyond just the 4-2 record. They're also sitting with a 2-1 record within their division, so that's very nice.
With a game they should have won.
Yeah, they definitely should have beaten Detroit, and just imagine how much different this playoff picture actually looks just with that win too. Basically the Vikings have set themselves up to not be. They're in a situation with Green Bay where a tiebreaker can't kill them. A head-to-head tiebreaker can't kill them. If they win on Thanksgiving,
that's a huge win. They have to win Thanksgiving.
Yeah, if they could find a way to win on Thanksgiving at Ford Field, this is shaping up to be a really good situation for the Vikings. Now, let's be clear. The Vikings last year were sitting at 5-1 right now, with coming off of a loss to Philadelphia. Is it too early to get excited or to be kind of optimistic regarding the rest of the season? I'm going to say no to that because I think there is a building reason to be excited about the Vikings team, and there's a more sustainable line. There's more evidence suggesting that this is a sustainable team versus what we saw from last year. At the same time, let's also be a little bit careful here. The back end of the schedule gets a little bit rough.
Very tough. It's very tough.
A lot of away games. You still got to go to Lambeau. You still got to go to Ford Field.
Got to go to that new stadium in Atlanta.
Yeah. There's a lot of tough games remaining on the schedule. A lot of tough there's a lot of hard-nosed football still to go here. I'm excited personally from a fan's perspective. I think there's a good reason to be excited about what the Vikings are capable of right now. But at the same time, I think that it isn't. I saw someone, I wish I remember who it was, but someone on Twitter today said something like, replying to your Skol scale, basically saying that, you're happy with the situation, but you're not committing until this is a one-quarterback team. And whoever it was that said that, credit to you, because I completely agree.
That's a good point.
Once you know who the quarterback is, this becomes a lot less hazy. You feel a little bit more comfortable moving forward.
Right. That's why it's hard to make that decision. I mean, it has to be made at some point to kind of switch to Teddy Bridgewater, but you don't want to mess with the success that you're having at the moment right now, because it'll impact where you stand when the playoffs arrive. So that's kind of, they have to make the decision at some point, and I don't expect Case Keenum to be the guy going into the playoffs.
Right.
But you don't want to mess up what you have now, because there's only 16 games in the seasons, and they all matter. But it's not like there's not winnable games for the Vikings on their schedule, but it gets very. 5 of their last 8 are on the road. They got that daunting 3-game stretch. Thanksgiving at Detroit, week 13 at Atlanta, week 14 at Carolina. I think that stretch there will define the season for the Vikings. If they can come out of there with 2 wins, that would be. I think they're set up for success, especially with that Thanksgiving game, obviously. Because then I think they have the end of the season at home against Chicago, and then Week 15 is home against Cincinnati. That should be. Those are a couple nice. I mean, their home games are relatively nice. They get Jared Goff at home, who has actually played a lot better this year. But they get the Rams at home, they get the Bengals at home, they get the Bears at home. So for what it's worth, their home games look like a pretty. I hate getting ahead of myself with looking at the schedule, but it doesn't look like a tough slate at home. And if they can get to that 6-2 mark before the bye, which looks very realistic at this point, you can look at those 3 home games and feel confident that they'll at least be in the picture by Week 17.
It's pretty amazing how big of a difference 4-2 makes from 3-3.
Yeah,
doesn't it? You know, because
and we talk about the parity. Look how much parity there is in the NFC right now, and I guess you can talk about the AFC too. It's the same way where they have. I mean, the AFC has their top 11 also at 500 or better, in the NFC. It's just that each team has each conference has an 0-6 team, kind of balancing things out.
Right. And then I believe both conferences also have a 5-1 team, balancing sides off on the other side of the spectrum there. So, I think the main takeaway here is just to remember that we're still in October. That's the big thing here. Remember that. But at the same time, there's reason to be optimistic now. We have a credible sample size. We have all of September to look at. We've got a couple of games kind of shifting away from adversity to see how the Vikings are able to handle this. The second time around with the quarterback carousel. I believe it was Adam West that said to me on Twitter that the Vikings have the perfect blueprint for dealing with adversity, and they do. They absolutely. There's no.
They can win with bad quarterback play.
Right.
And not a lot of teams in the NFL.
And they also have done this before, and they had it go poorly, so they know what can't happen. I mean, some of that is obvious. You obviously know what can't happen.
Yeah,
but
health.
But they went and fixed, so many different things this offseason that were, kind of the black marks on last team's roster. Riley Reiff, man, does he have an MVP candidacy?
He's one of 3 starting left tackles, I believe, to not allow a sack this year yet.
The other ones are Trent Williams and Joe Thomas, I believe. So,
sure, it's something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's absurd. I'm serious. Does he warrant MVP conversation? I mean,
well,
offensive player of the year.
Offensive linemen aren't going to win. A quarterback's going to win.
I know.
MVP.
I'm aware of that. I'm just saying,
But for the Vikings, I mean, they're going to have 7 different quarterbacks start this year at this point. That's an interesting point, because there hasn't been a whole lot of continuity on the Vikings offense besides Adam Thielen, maybe.
You can make a case for Adam Thielen. You can make a case for Dalvin Cook, but Dalvin Cook's not coming back.
Right. No, you're not going to make a case for Cook after 4 games or 3.5 games. So that's a good point, right? Reiff might be your offensive MVP to this point. It's probably he or Thielen at this point, I would say.
One of the two. So I believe that should just about wrap up the show here. I don't think we have anything in the Twitter mailbox, correct?
I will double check because I did bump it again before the show, so I'll have to look that up again. But we didn't have anything. That you guys should probably start doing that. And I should be better about tweeting, and interacting with people. I'm not great at that, but feel free at any time of the day. You don't need a prompt from us. Just go ahead and if you see a tweet that you agree with, you see something during a game, you see whatever, feel free to tag us in it, and we'll get it on the show because we like to see what you guys think and interact with your thoughts. So I'll end the show on that, and then you can do what you usually do to wrap up the show.
Absolutely. All right, so that's all she wrote for our midweek edition of the About the Labor podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, VikingsTerritory.com, of course. Make sure to check out that article that we talked about earlier, the coverage chart article that will be dropping on Thursday or Friday, one of the two.
Full scale will be up on Wednesday as well, so when you guys listen to this, probably, or most of you, it should be up. So
there you go. Skull scale as well, and I believe Austin is actually bringing out the Blyle's Burning Takes later on this week as well. Yes. So plenty of content coming up at Vikings Territory. The roundtable will be on later this week, so make sure to subscribe on YouTube so you're there for that. But yeah, so I believe that's it for us, and we will catch you on Friday for a full Baltimore Ravens preview and likely more Teddy Bridgewater discussion. So talk then. Thanks for joining us, guys.